In this topic, I'm going to be covering colour correction and some of the other features of the effects menu. To begin, I'll summarise the commands under colour. First, the Lumichroma group. These are basic colour correction commands such as brightness, contrast, saturation, and hue rotation. Cast colorises the picture with the selected colour. Gain increases or decreases the amount of colour in the selected channel. Map replaces the colours in the image with colours from the palette, ranging from dark on the left of the palette to light on the right of the palette. Posterize progressively reduces the number of steps in luminance and chrominance in the image. So my brief today is to produce a sting based on these pieces of car footage. When I take a look at the rushes, I can see that they were shot under poor light and that we need to use colour correction just to enhance them a little bit. So I now go into Effects, and where I have the Transform Effects option, I need to clear down the timeline and use Original All to reset the parameters. So to enhance this clip, I'll reduce the brightness a little, increase the contrast and the saturation. And here's the result after processing. I notice that the end frame here has quite a severe field flicker on it, and since my sting is going to resolve on the end frame, I'm going to use one of the other functions within Effects, Field Mode, just to correct that field flicker. And I'm going to sell that, and my clip is mainly field based except for the final frame, which is now frame based. My next task is to take a piece of footage and create the illusion that it is filmed in black and white. Give it a vintage feel. So I'm going to reset the effects, desaturate, and then take out some of the blue channel, increase a little bit of the red channel, take out some of the brightness, and the result is a sepia tone. I want to further enhance the black and white vintage footage effect by adding some flickering. And I'm going to use the effects timeline provided with the Transform Effects option to achieve this. If I ramp up the contrast and then step to another point on the timeline and wind down the contrast, the values change over time. This orange marker next to the parameter value indicates that the parameter values are changing over time, and if I press on the orange box, I gain access to the graph representing the parameter values for contrast. We notice here that as I drag along the timeline from frame 1, the parameter value falls from this to this. I can get into the graph, and by pressing down with a pen, draw parameter value changes into the graph. I can delete a point away and insert a new point. Using a vertical white line, pressing down and dragging up on that, I can zoom in to change the values very precisely. By pressing and pulling down on the white line, I can zoom out again. As I drag the slider along, precise parameter value for each frame is flagged up on the graph. So I'll just finish drawing in the flickering contrast. I can save an individual point by going save and pressing on the point, and then restore that value by pressing on another point. So this parameter value has now been copied from here to here. In addition, I can save all, and if I delete all, I can restore all from the save buffer. So here's a preview of the flickering effect. I can take each individual point and move it around, edit it at any stage. I can also use tangent handles to adjust the tension on the in and out points for each part of the graph. I can also set them to linear, curved, or stopped, just as in paste up. So when I press here on the slider to confirm that, we can also see the keyframes marked on the timeline here as well. And after processing, this is the result. My next task is to create the illusion that more than one car was featured in the shoot. In order to do this, I need to make a selective colour correction on the paintwork for the car. I must first make a key off of the paintwork on the original car. I'll then reverse that key so that only the area of the picture not protected by the key is colour corrected. So I'll now go into colour and set up a hue rotation by dragging the hues through the spectrum until I find the required colour. Notice that all of the hues of all the other elements within the picture have changed. If I select Use Keyer, the effect is masked off by the live key within the keyer. And after processing, here's the result. So here are the three elements for the composite. I now need to generate a background, and I'm going to take this blurred shot of the car and colour map it in order to create a background image. So I'm going to load up a palette. And go into colour map. The dark colours in the image are on the left-hand side of the palette, going through progressively lighter shades of grey to white on the right-hand side of the palette, and the palette colours replace these levels of luminance. With this result. So I now have my 3 foreground elements and a background. I now need to create a text reveal and a framing device. This is the black and white map for the text reveal and the frame. So I'll just copy that and key it back on top of itself to create a stencil. As I mentioned before, the Transform Effects option enables the keyframing of all parameter values within Effects. And to make this reveal, I'm going to use a keyframed grow. Grow progressively grows or shrinks the edges of a stencil. So to reveal the text, if I set it to a minimum value at frame 1, go through the clip and reset it to normal, I now have a keyframed grow which I can apply to the stencil. With processor intensive functions such as grow and blur, it's worth remembering that only a small part of the picture can be processed by selecting Do Pen, then Do It. In this way, only the required part of the picture is processed, saving quite a lot of time. So if I now remove the stencil, we can see the result. Within this framing device, I want to create a metallic texture. And I can use another one of the tools within the Effects menu to achieve this. I'm going to take this colour corrected footage and apply a mosaic to it. Mosaic increases the size of the pixel. This too is keyframeable, but what I want to do to create the metallic effect is set the height to the minimum value of 1 and the width to the maximum value, which is 720. The result is that the pixels in the centre of the picture are stretched out to the maximum in the horizontal axis. And after processing, this is the result. So I can now take the metallic texture, the animated stencil, and my 3 foregrounds, and combine those over the colour map background to create this result. So I need to reveal one more piece of text, which is this logo. To reveal this text, I'm going to use a blur. As with all parameters, Transform Effects enables the keyframing of blur. So we can pull focus, for example, starting with maximum amount of blur and pulling that back to normal. What I'm going to use in this case is a directional blur. This applies the blur in one direction only. So I'm going to set the value for the blur and preview the effect. So the blur is applied only in the horizontal axis. If I add a streak to the blur, the effect is further enhanced. And if I select symmetry, the streaks are applied in both directions. If I want to change the angle of blur, I can do that with the blur angle box, but I'm going to leave it at 0, which is along the x-axis. So at frame 1, I have a maximum value, and at frame 25, I set that to 0. So the directional blur gradually decreases over time. With this result. Now that I have the animated mat, my final task is to colour correct my composite through that mat using a keyframe colour correction. So I'll select Use Stencil, go to frame 15 and set the peak values, wind up the brightness and the contrast to create a flash, and then go down to frame 25 and bring those values down. And rotate the hues round into a different part of the spectrum. Drag along the timeline to preview the effect. And process. So to summarise, I've created 3 different versions of the original footage using colour correction just to enhance the original footage, to create the illusion of vintage black and white footage, and a selective colour correction to change the colour of the paintwork on the car. I have a keyframe grow to reveal the metallic text. The metallic effect itself was achieved with mosaic, and finally a keyframe directional blur to create the mat to reveal the final colour correction on the text. And here's the final composite.
In this topic, I will be covering cutouts and keyframing in the 3D paste-up menu. When there are no cutouts within paste-up, the menu will look like this. we get the choice of cutting a picture and a stencil, a clip and text. Text will only appear when text fonts have been selected from the library. We'll look at this later on. So first of all, I'm going to start by cutting out a section from this image here. When a cutout has been made, the Paste Up menu enlarges to show the functions that can be applied to that cutout. When you place your pen over any cutout, an axis appears. This will offer you a visual representation of where that cutout is in 3D space. Axes will always appear in the centre of the cutout. I can position my cutout within 3D space in three ways. First of all, I can move it arbitrarily, or I can use the axis to move it either in the X, the Y, or the Z. At this point, it may be handy to show you an example of how the 3D axes work. As we can see from this picture here, the Y-axis will move to the top and to the bottom of the screen. The Z-axis will move in and out of the screen, and the X-axis will move from left to right. So the axis always gives us a visual representation of where the axis is within 3D space. So to go back to our image, we have three methods of positioning: arbitrarily, using our axis numeric values, in this example, X being the first value box, Y being the second, and Z being the third. Or of course, as I showed you before, we can actually move on the axis themselves. Notice how the axis goes pink when my pen is in close proximity. Original All will always take my cutout back to its original size and shape, and indeed position where it was cut out. As well as positioning the cutout, we also have control of positioning the axis only, anywhere on the screen. Spin and size work in exactly the same way with the axis as position. When I select an axis using my numeric box, in this example Y, I can reposition just using the Y axis. Or indeed, I could reposition arbitrarily as well as selecting the axis. When I've controlled the numeric boxes, you'll notice that within the menu, a new section of features are revealed. When activating quarter, that will spin the cutout 90 degrees. Half will spin the cutout 180 degrees, and whole will spin it 360 degrees. Ink and deck will determine the direction of the spin. When a cutout has been spun, the system will automatically presume that you want to move that within perspective. Now there is a way of overriding this perspective move by selecting screen. This then overrides all of the perspective coordinates within the system. Another way of distorting our cutouts is to use a feature called pin. When pin is selected, the numeric boxes disappear to accommodate the pin menu. The cutout has 4 arrows which are placed at each corner by default. These arrows can be repositioned by selecting tags and the relevant corner arrow to move. The green numeric boxes represent X and Y, so that the arrows can be repositioned more accurately. Repositioning tags is especially useful when you're using 4-point track that isn't perfectly square. Again, this will be covered in a future topic. When a cutout has a variety of different moves, like in this example, it may be that you want to delete one particular move. So for example, if I want to actually get rid of any of the spin changes, all I need to do is hit original and spin. All of the spin numbers are now taken back to the default number of 0. Now all of these controls can be applied to a cutout over time by opening up the timeline by pressing on the keyframe. This has now opened up a timeline of 300 frames. This figure can be adjusted using the numeric keypad. Let's just load in another cutout from the table, this time of a baseball. Now what about if I want to move the baseball from one side of the screen to the other? First of all, repositioning and resizing the ball, I want to move it from left to right. At the moment, if I scroll along the timeline, we can see that there is no keyframe moves applied. In order for me to make keyframe moves, there's two ways I can do this. First of all, by using auto. This, incidentally, is the default setting. By going to the end of the timeline, I can now reposition my ball over to the right. The system has now instantly made a keyframe move. What we can see on the screen here is stripy string. Stripy string can indeed be turned off within the full page menu. However, it's very good to have stripy string on because we can see exactly where our keyframes are occurring and where they are moving. At the moment, this particular movement is in curved keyframes. In other words, it's going to get faster and then get slower at the final frame. We can see as well, if we look at the stripy string, that the frame indicators are of differing lengths. In other words, they're slower when they're smaller and faster when they're longer. So this is in fact accelerating and decelerating. Now if I make another copy of this ball to make two cutouts, the first thing to point out is that all of the keyframe moves have been lost. So I will need to reposition my ball. You can see there that the first cutout still has its keyframe moves attached. So what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to do a keyframe move using the edit function. Edit is provided when we turn off auto. If I now go to the end of the timeline again and reposition my cutout, we do not instantly get a keyframe move. In other words, I have to press edit now to confirm that I want that keyframe move. With this particular ball, I'm now going to produce a linear keyframe move. We can do this by tapping on linear and keyframes. Straight away notice the difference between the stripy strings. This time the stripy string frame markers are all the same length. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a try it. Now try it processes at half the resolution and doesn't use up any frame storage. Trying it again will give you an exact representation of the speed and movement of your keyframes. So we can see here that the top cutout travels slower to start off with, but gradually speeds up, and the bottom one remains at a constant speed. Okay. I'm now going to delete my first cutout by simply selecting delete and tapping on the cutout. What I now want to do is add another move another keyframe move onto my timeline. Again, I can do this with many ways. First of all, to find the position or the frame number where I want to adjust my move, I can either tap in the relevant frame number, or I can tap on the timeline, or indeed I can tap on the stripy string. At this point, I now want to take the position of the ball up. Again, I'm still in edit, so I just need to press edit to confirm that move. I'm going to work in auto for the time being. Okay, so now we have a move going in an arch. We can see the stripy string. It's telling us that we have indeed got a curved move here and a curved move at the beginning and a curved move at the end. We've also got control of the speed going into and going out of a specific point. For example, here at the moment we have curved. If we go down to the arrows down here, by selecting this arrow here, we've now got a linear move in and a curved move out. Again, by tapping on the right arrow, this is now producing a linear move out. So we've got full control of the movement of our keyframes in and out of certain points. Stopped will actually produce a stopped keyframe, and it will accelerate into and out of that point. Again, notice the difference in the stripy string. Okay, so when I'm happy with my result, what I'm going to do is I'm now going to process. Pressing Do It will process the clip. If we now go to the clip desk, we can see that there is my process clip. If we just play it out, we'll notice that there's actually something a bit strange about the movement. It's a bit juddery. This is because I've forgotten to process this in field. It's very important when dealing with any movement within the Paste Up menu to process the movement within fields. If the field box is on, the system will process within frames. So here is our result. A much smoother result than the frame-based. I'm just going to finally add a bit of a spin into my ball to make it spin around. Very simply, going to the end of my keyframe, selecting the spin box, I want it to spin round on the Z, and I'm going to have a whole 360-degree spin. And let's have that linear as well. Again, processing that. Now the spin has been applied as well as the position move. So obviously keyframing can get an awful lot more complicated than this, remembering that we have 99 layers that can all be working together at the same time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an example. I'm going to produce a title sequence for a daytime television programme called Nicky Stapleton to the Point. Now I've got a few rushes here that have all been colour corrected and colour treated. They've also been slowed down as well. So we've got lots of rushes. We've also got an outline of Nicky Stapleton's face that we're going to add as a stencil cutout. And we've also got a write-on of her signature. So start at the beginning here. If I just play this out first of all, this is in fact a rough edit or an edit of Nicky going about her daily business, and what we have done is we have colour corrected it, slowed it down, blurred it and all the rest of it. Now I want to use that as my background for my composition. Now the first thing that I'm not happy with here is the darkness of this footage. So what I would need to do is to brighten it up. Now obviously I could use the colour corrector in this instance, but what I can also do is to use paste up. Now making sure that the clip is in the central working area, I can now go into paste up. Now we've got our previous cutout there, so what I'm going to do first of all is to get rid of that cutout. There's a specific order that I need to do this in. First of all, you need to original all. That takes all the coordinates back to the default settings of 0. Now I want to delete the keyframes and the timeline, so I hit delete clear. And finally I want to get rid of the cutout itself by hitting delete cut. So now we recognise this area as before, and this time I want to be dealing with clip. Now when I select clip, you'll notice that we actually get an extra menu down here. This indeed is relating to the clips on my clip desk. You can see that we can step through to the beginning of our clips using all of the features that you'll recognise from the clip desk. So this helps us very easily to find the area that we're going to want to cut out. There it is. Just going to select all to cut out the whole image. Going to wipe the background to white. So at the moment what we've got is a cutout on the end of my pen. It is indeed a moving clip, and if I turn on the keyframer we'll be able to see that there indeed is that clip. I know it's 300 frames long, so I'm going to just adjust that figure there. Also going to just resize that slightly. Now all I'm going to do now is to drop the opacity of the layer down, and you can see that very subtly that has now brightened up my background layer. Now we'll need to process this, but the first thing that we need to work out is whether we need to process this in fields or frames. Now obviously I've not applied any moving keyframes to this clip, so I don't need to use field. But if we go back to the original footage, we'll notice that there is indeed field flicker. Now, if I was to process this clip as a frame-based clip, it would actually get rid of all of the field flicker. So I need the system to take into account that there is original field source flicker. And this is the box that I need to turn on. The system will now reproduce the field flicker within my new clip. When that's processed, we can see that this is the result. Now what I want to do is I actually want to now set that as my background. I want to tell the system that that is the background that I want to use. Now we can do this either within Paste Up, under the Cut menu, by selecting Set Background, or we can do it from within the Clip menu. So now, when I go back into Paste Up, the background will already be set. So if I just delete my previous cutout, and now what I want to do is to start to build up my composition. So again, looking along my clip desk, the first cutout that I want is my Nikki signature. So cutting that out. Now often when you cut out a new layer, the background is replaced by the layer you've just cut out. All you need to do is double tap on the background box to get back your original set background. Okay, now because this is a write-on, we can't actually see the full result until later on in the clip. But what I need to do is to resize and reposition that. Now if I use auto to do this, remember that this is automatically going to put a keyframe move every time I change something within the menu. So in other words, if I then want to get rid of that keyframe move, I have to turn off auto, tap on the relevant boxes that have been changed, so for example position, This has then copied that position move and the coordinates of the position move. Go back to frame 1 and now press edit. That has now replaced the coordinates with the new coordinates at frame 1, therefore getting rid of that keyframe move. However, I've then got to do exactly the same within size. So in this particular example, it would be a better way of working would be to work with edit. So remember, to work with edit, we turn off auto. We can now go to the position where we can see the signature, alter the size and the position, and of course the system is still waiting for me to confirm, so I can now go back to frame 1 and press edit, and now all of those moves have been placed in correctly at frame 1. A lot simpler than using the auto box. Okay, I actually want to just adjust the colour of this particular layer. We can do this very simply by selecting the colour that we may want to change within the palette and selecting Style and Stencil. This then puts that colour over the whole of the cutout. So what I also want to do is to add a style to my cutout. We can see here that we have a variety of different choices. In this particular example, I want to apply a shadow. By tapping on shadow, we now get another little menu pop up. The first one is the opacity of the shadow. So I can adjust that to make it quite subtle. We also can change the colour of the shadow by putting a colour into the paint pot here. We can also adjust the direction and the depth. So I'm quite happy with that, and now I'm going to return back to my main paste up menu by just tapping on shadow. Note the blue box to alert you that something within there is open. Okay, now for my next layer. This time the outline of Nikki herself. Again, cutting that out. Remember that when we're in paste up, the last coordinates of the last cutout are copied onto the new cutout. So the first thing that I need to do is to hit Original All, double click on the background to get our background back up. And I'm going to turn off the shadow because it's automatically been added onto that layer. Okay. I'm going to reposition that, resize it. Again, it doesn't matter at this point that I'm in auto because, as you can see, we can see her right at the beginning. So we can still be at frame 1. Okay, just reposition her slightly. And again, I want to apply a colour to her. So again, selecting the colour and applying it as a stencil. So I'm going to use crop to get rid of that left-hand edge. So there we go, we're well on our way now. Okay, time for the next layer. So we're going into 3 layers now. This layer, as we can see, has got a reveal over the top in a form of a mask. So I'm just going to cut that area there. Again, tapping on the background. And again, don't forget to Original All and Original Crop, because that crop will still be there within the cutout. So again, we can't actually see the cutout until way into our timeline. So once again, I'm going to turn off auto so that I can reposition my cutout in my desired area. Okay, time for the next layer. Again, we've got a reveal with this layer as well. And again, we need to reposition that when we can see it. So again, I'm going to come out of auto. Now this time, as you can see, we've got quite a few cutouts on the screen. So it may well be a good idea for me at this point to use only. When I select only, I'm making sure that I'm only going to be treating that particular cutout. So here, there's absolutely no way that anything else will be moved and repositioned. Again, when I'm happy with the position, I'm going to go and confirm my edit. So let's just have a scroll through there and see how we're doing. Okay, there's another thing that I want to adjust here. If you can see here that Nikki Stapleton's signature is actually underneath the image, and I actually want to bring that forward. So I actually want to change the priorities. Now the way that the HAL numbers the cutouts, it numbers the bottom or the base cutout as layer 1 and the top as layer 99. So in this particular example, I want to take layer 1 and I want to take it to the top of the pile. So all I'm going to do is open up and select that numeric box and choose B on my keyboard. This will then go to the biggest figure available, which in this case is 4. Okay, finally, just want to add one more layer. This time we can see that we've actually not got a moving mat on this, but this isn't a problem because I can actually do this within Paste Up myself. So just cutting that layer out. So if I now original all to take all the coordinates back to default, I've still got the shadow on, but I'm not too worried about that at the moment. Now I don't actually need to work in edit at the moment because of course I can see that right at the beginning of my timeline. So I can go ahead and reposition without applying a keyframe move within the timeline. Okay, now what I do want to do is I want that to reveal after this main image of Nikki has disappeared. So the first thing that I need to do is to just move along my timeline to find the point where she starts to disappear. There we go. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use crop and keyframe my crop. So the first thing that I want to do is just to apply a dummy keyframe at that position. So I do that by just moving a specific numeric box. That then applies a keyframe move. So if I go back to the first frame now, I can now use my crop to completely get rid of that particular example. Now when we go back to this point, again we can get rid of that as well. So then let's maybe go 50 frames further along and we'll have that completely revealed at that point. So there we go. Using our keyframeable crop to reveal. Now at this point I'm not actually happy about the position of my keyframe move. Now what do? Do I go back and redo those keyframe moves? I don't actually have to do that. What I can do is I can actually reposition my keyframes. By selecting this numeric box here and making sure that I select the exact keyframe, I can actually pull my keyframes back visually. This is very, very helpful for editing keyframes. Again, I'm going to go to the next keyframe move and I'm going to do exactly the same. Visually take that back. And then finally, a keyframe move to take the crop back off again. Okay, so there's certain things that I need to add as well to this in the form of text. As these all disappear, we want to have the name of the program to the point in a plinth. So what I've got on my table is the plinth. It's just a single coloured square. There we go. I'm going to take the shadow off of that and again I'm just going to reposition that where I want it. Also just going to change the colour, or maybe let's change the opacity of that. Again, I want the Nikki logo to be at the top, so I'm going to change the priorities. This time I'm going to use the S smallest. That then takes it down to the smallest number. And finally, I want to add some text. Now, as I said before, text is found within the paste up, but only when it's been loaded from the library. We've got 1,085 fonts available to us. I've just chosen to look at the Futura family, and all I do is I need to just tap on those to select those to use from the Futura family. Now, what this red alert box is telling me is that the heap is full. If I go back to Paste Up, we can see that within the text font menu, we have a buffer. This buffer allows us to have 30 fonts loaded in. Basically, I've got my maximum amount of fonts that I can have. But that's okay, because I've actually got the font that I want in the form of Futura Book. So I just set that font. I can also now adjust the kerning, the size, and the leading if I have more than one line. When I'm happy with my font, I can just press end. That has now been transposed into a cutout, which is available again by the tap of my pen. So this time I want to just resize that. Again, I'm going to use only. Always a good idea when you've got more than a couple of cutouts on the screen at any time. And I'm going to also change the colour of that as well. And once again, I can now keyframe that over time. So at the beginning, I'm going to have 0 opacity, and where we lose our last of our moving footage, we'll put a dummy keyframe, and then over time we'll take that up to 100%. Once again, I actually want to do that on my plinth as well. In order to find the keyframe of the previous cutout, just go to Layer 7, move my timeline along using my arrow box, and now go to Layer 6, and I've got exactly the same keyframe for those particular moves, and out as well. So after processing, here is the final result. In this topic, I'll be showing spatial dynamic features and ALF tracking. Let's take the first part of that sequence. And you can see here that we've got a ribbon shot where the text weaves its way round the ribbon. And I've got the elements for that. You can see the clean background here and the text, and that's literally just a keyframe of some text moving from left to right, and also I've got the ribbon with its associated clip stencil. Let's go and cut that out and recreate it. Now if I go into the feature flat, you can see I've got a sub-menu here, and all of these options enable me to go and actually distort the image. So using ripple, I can actually go and ripple my clip using X, Y and Z initially, just to start the process off. And I can go and use Z just to increase the depths of that ripple. And I can use frequency to change the amount of ripples within the clip. And you can see here I've got, as I increase the value, I get more ripples. As I pull it down again, I have less. Let's go and animate that. So I'll move my keyframes to 100. And by pressing on start and then scrolling, you can see I'm actually continuing that movement. And there I've actually generated a keyframe. So I've moved through that movement 5 times in all. So you can see here that the flat button is turned to ripple. This is so that if I go into another part of the menu, you can still see that I've got ripple selected. If I turn off ripple, it'll just default the cutout back. And I can go into another feature, you can see then that turns to bend. Now here what I want to clip further by actually pushing on these points. So I'm going to first of all lock off the points just by tapping on them. Let's try and make it symmetrical. And also what I can do is actually use those points to then move and manipulate the video. So this could be a moving sequence. We could animate, say, a dog's face if we wanted to, or an animal's features. They're all sort of keyframeable. Here, however, we're using it to create a static effect. So once that's completed, I can just literally go in and reposition my cutout at the bottom of the screen. Let's change the size of it slightly. And I need to go and cut out my text now. So this is now a clip stencil, and I'll use the last parameters actually, just reposition that further down. If I move my timeline along here, you can see that the text has taken on the same bend features as the ribbon. Let's go and give it a different colour. So I'm going to pick up this brown colour and then style it in that colour. And also when you're processing a clip like this, which is field based, turn on fields here, and that's now ready to go and process. Let's put it against its background as well. So let's pull this back, set that as my new background, and there it is. And we could also make other adjustments, such as changing the opacity of each layer. So it's creating a more subtle effect there. So our final clip will look something like this. Let's have a look into the clip a bit further, because we've got a page turn there that I want to go and recreate as well. So that's again using those spatial dynamic features, and I've got all the elements here, and I've literally just gone and taken 50 frames of that clip that I've already shown, and 50 frames of a blurred clip, and the background that the page turn is going to go against. So that's a blurred version basically of the background. So let's go and cut the clip. So I'll cut the clip out and use my own crop marks so the blanking doesn't appear on the page turn. Let's go into flat now and go to turn. What I'm going to do is just spin this cutout round so you can see in perspective what I'm doing. Go back to turn and then turn on wrap, and then just scroll up the tablet. You can see that the amount of wrap I apply changes the amount of fold that I want on that page. So I don't want too much, let's bring that down a bit. And also the angle here can be changed to any direction that you wanted, so it goes around 360 degrees. Again, I've got full control of the other features of my keyframe, so I can just original spin that. And then what I'm going to do is use start again to fold so that I've got my first keyframe. Then I can move to the end of my keyframes, and then scrolling back to the left, I can then make the page disappear off top left hand side of the screen. There we are. Okay, let's go and bring in the background that's associated with that and process that. So remember to turn on fields, and this is a field, this is a keyframe move, so I need to turn fields on down here. Let's go and process it. So as you can see here, we've got the front of the page processing, and we need the back of the page to be done as a separate pass, but with the same keyframes. So once that's completed, I can go back down to my desk and just play out the new version as my next background. So what I need to do now is go and cut out the blurred back clip, turn only on so it replaces the other cutout and takes on the same keyframes. You can see there the background clip with this new layer over the top. So what I need to do now is define which area I want to show of this layer, and when you're in position you can choose between front and back, and this means basically the front of the video and the back of the video. So turning on front, you can see there front of the video appears, and we want actually the back, and you can see there that it mimics exactly the keyframes that we had before. Let's go and see the finished version again. And let's have a look at this clip in a bit more detail, because we've got parts of the video actually, and that was created by using the ALF features. ALF stands for Auto Lock Follow and is either used to create keyframes for a cutout to mimic the motion within the background clip, or to stabilise a clip. And I've got an example here where there is quite a lot of camera movement that we just want to go in. So in actual fact, what I need to do is go in and look at a part of the clip which would normally be stationary, And if I go in and just tap on ALF, again I get a sub-menu appearing, and I can just go in and select and pick on the point that I want to go and track. And preferably that might be, say, a corner or a spot, something that's easily distinguished against the other patterns around that point. So here, for instance, I'm just picking on a spot, and that is unique in that area. And you can see it's changed the clip to black and white there, so it's actually tracking on the luminance of the clip. That square there, that inner square, is the target area, and the yellow markers round it are the search area. Each of these parameters can be changed, so the target area is the one on the left, and that can be enlarged and reduced, and so can the area, the search area. Now obviously if I go in and enlarge both of those, then it will go in and prolong that tracking process. So I'll just go and press do it, and that tracks that point for the rest of the clip. And you can see there that we've got a frame count, so we know how far we're into the clip, and also by how much that point is moving from the initial target point. Okay, so once that's processed, we can go and preview that point. That just gives me a crosshair that I'm able to see working real time. Now to go and stabilise that, I want to go and pick in a point which is sort of midway between the sways, so about there would do fine. And then just press stabilise. This is actually like putting a pin into the clip. It's actually pinning down that point. Then the clip will then manoeuvre around that point, and you'll actually start to see there's some blanking on moving in to compensate for that pinning point. Let's go and have a look at the final version of that, and it always creates a copy of my original and places it at the end of the reel. And we can go and get rid of that blanking by going into Paste Up, cutting out the clip and enlarging it. Now there is another way that we can use this ALF tracking feature. We can also change the rotation of the clip. And here we can go back into ALF again and pick a point on this line. Let's pick another point. The problem with these 2 points is that we've got a line that is a very similar pixel pattern. So it's actually going to slide along that line if we don't constrict the ALF track in some way. We've got horizontal and vertical here that enable us to constrict it horizontally, or in this case we need to restrict it vertically. Let's go and process that. So as you can see there, the actual points remain vertically stationary, and they follow the movement of the train on the angle. So now what we can do is go in and pick a point where the train is most horizontal, and then just press on rotation. So this works in the same way as the 1 point track. It's literally going to stop the train from rotating. And in actual fact, it's stabilising the clip as well. Again, the final version at the end of the reel. Let's play that out. Okay, also with the ALF track, we can go in and place cutout over a background clip. So here, for instance, I just want to place a cutout over a moving train. So we've got the original rushes here, and I've gone in and tracked on all 4 points. So again, just press 1 and then tap on 2 and tap on 3 and then 4. And it's important
that you go in this clockwise fashion, otherwise it'll actually spin the cutout. So let's just go and preview that track. So that's fairly stationary there, and bring down the cutout in paste up. So let's just get rid of our previous material, just a picture in the stencil, and then cut as closely as you can into the object, and then bring down the background. So set the background, go into paste up, and just remind it that the background's there, and default it so that it gives you the correct frame count. And what I'm going to do here is go into pin, because basically these pinning points should be in the same position as my ALF track. So just to remind myself where those tracks were, so it's in between those two doors and the edge there. So I can go back into paste up and reposition those tags so that they identify exactly with the ALF tracking points. This is really good because it means that you don't have to have an exactly square cutout to go with your ALF tracking points. So let's go and bring in the ALF tracks, and by pressing on ALF background, that will bring up all of your keyframes. So we've got on every frame there a keyframe, and you can see there that it's stuck down the cutout to my clip. So by pressing do it, you can see there it's processing the movement exactly. Let's go and have a look at that. There we are. Okay, let's go back to our original Christmas example, because here we need to go in and add another element to this sequence. So we need to go in and track on an area of this bauble here. So again, this time, instead of using 4 points, we're just using 1. And turn any horizontal or vertical off here, because we don't need to restrict that track. So before we were using a 4-point track to actually track a cutout onto a background. Now we're using a 1-point track to mimic that background move. Okay, so once that's complete, I'm just going to preview the motion of that so we can check that it hasn't strayed at all, and that remains pretty much spot on to that point. Now for the next bit, we need to go in and alter our flat clip that we've got here. I'll just stop that there and then go back into paste up. And to make it into one of those little baubles, what I did was went in and cut out the clip using a square grid. Then I went back into flat and went and wrapped the clip. So here again you've got a number of X and Y axis values, and if I just tap on the X axis, you can see here that I can go and change my clip into a kind of cylinder shape, and I can change that vertically as well there. Or I can affect them both at once. So let's just turn that off and on again. That defaults it. Let's change this frame count, move to the center so you can see more of the clip. And by affecting both of those, what I can do is just pull my pen down diagonally to the right to affect both the X and the Y axis. And this gives me a sphere effect. And you can see that both of those values are fairly similar. Let's just make them identical and change the size of the shot. Now also, to make it look a bit more three-dimensional, I could go in and apply some light effects. So what I'm going to do is create a copy of that cutout, because it's quite difficult to go and manoeuvre at the moment. And then I'm just going to go and angle the light by going and angling the cutout. So by spinning it round, I can actually make the light come from the bottom left. It's almost with the same angle as the Z-axis line. So going into light effects, I can go and press set high, and there you can see it's hitting the cutout in the centre there. And if I reposition my cutout, you can see that it's also hit the bottom of my ball. Let's just undo that move. Also, if I go and spin round this cutout, you can see it moving over the surface of it. So it really knows the depth of my clips and also where they're positioned within the screen. Now also, what I want to do is make the ball look as if it's been backlit. So what I'm going to do is spin the cutout right round, so it's almost going backwards there, and then set the other highlight. There we are. And we've got a number of other numerical values that are able to control the light with. So I might want to make this first light a bit more intense. So I'm just going to delete the cutout that I've just made and increase that intensity. Let's bring that up. And the width up to say 5. And let's just bring down the width of the light at the back there a bit, so say 90 or 95. So you can go in and keep on changing your values till you get basically what you want. And also we're able to go and change the colour of the light. So if I swipe down and pick a colour from my palette, let's say a light colour, just insert it into that box, we can see it's applied it to both lights. Now there's also a low light on here as well, and if I go and set that, we can see that it darkens down the areas further away from the light, but I don't need that on for now. It's quite a light clip that I want to keep it that way. So once that's all processed, it will look something like this. And you can see I've gone and added in some fades there just to make the clip look a bit smoother. So let's go and include that in our example. I've gone and set the ball clip as my background. Let's go and cut it out. Before I do that, I've still got all of my original cutouts that I used before. So I just need to default all of those values by pressing original high, original 2. You can see that light effects has now disappeared. I also need to turn wrap off. So turn wrap off, and now I'm able to go in and cut out my clip quite freely. So just delete the cutout. So I'm free now to go in and cut out the clip with its stencil. Let's bring in the background, turn off the grid, and change the size of the cutout so that it's identical to the one that it's following the movement of. So you need to place it over the top, almost as a duplicate. We can do fine adjustments with the size on the y-axis there. Let's take the opacity of the cutout down and reposition the axis to where the ALF track was. So this axis actually follows the keyframe movement. So let's bring the opacity back up again. Pressing delete clear and pressing on keyframe again, I have the background frame count, and I'm now free to go in and press ALF background. So now you can see it's loading up frame by frame my keyframes, and you can see that that really does mimic the background clip there. Also within this sequence we have some numbers appearing at the end, so I've got to cut out the number and apply that to the same move as the other cutout. So let's just go in and reposition that cutout and then go and attach it, so press attach and then to the side and then the centre of the other one, so that's now a slave to this cutout and we'll follow its movements. And I can still go in and amend the size and the position of it. And now you can see as I drag along this timeline that it follows the movements exactly. Now I want this 9 to appear behind that clip, so we can just alter the order without affecting the keyframes. And I also want to go and change the opacity of the front cutout at the end. So let's change that to 0. And fading down over 75 frames. See here that I can go in and add some more keyframes without effect already there. Let's go and have a look at the final version again.